Hello, everyone. I'm Daz, and welcome to American Civil War and UK History podcast. This presentation is available as a video on our YouTube channel or as a podcast from wherever you get your podcast from. And to keep up to date with everything American Civil War and UK history, you can do that via our website, where you'll find blog posts, updates, links to all of our social media pages. The link is available in the podcast description. And joining me today is the Chief Historian of American Battlefield Trust, none other than Garry Adelman. Welcome, Garry.
Thanks for having me, Daz. Hello, everybody.
Thank you. And so this podcast heavily relies on pictures on a PowerPoint presentation. So if you would like to see those photos that we are talking about, then please head over to our YouTube channel. The link will be available in the audio podcast description. Today's discussion is about Garry's favourite Civil War photos. But before we get into that, Garry, can you please tell us, and I've wanted to know this for a long time, how did you actually get into history?
Well, I wasn't a kid who read a lot. I come from a family of storytellers, so I learned about history that way. But for whatever reason, I was obsessed with photos that had been taken at a place and what that place looked like now. So when, on my last day of sophomore year of high school, I happened to pick up this book in my high school library, William Fresnito's Antietam book, which takes photos and aligns them then and now. I didn't know such a thing existed. I didn't know photos were so old, and that was my spark. I became instantly obsessed with the Civil War and historic photography, and here we are. I find myself in this strange position of somehow people want to listen to me talk about my obsessions. So thanks for having me.
There you go. Yeah. Okay, so the first one, and this is your favorite Confederate photo of the war, and this is the first Civil War photo inside Fort Sumter. So just explain a little bit about why you like this photograph.
Well, first of all, Confederate photography is rare. There are studio portraits, but really after the first few months of the Civil War, we don't have photos of Confederates in the field. And this photo with the Confederate flag flying over, Fort Sumter at the place where the Civil War started. You can argue with me about that if you'd like, but I think it started right here. And within a day, the photographer, a guy named Jesse Bowles, he had a photographic assistant or a photographer named Alma Palot, and he went out and recorded photos in the harbor, and a couple inside of which this is one, and this is the best one. You've got the flag flying. You've got some photo bombers in the window there, I see. You've got early war Confederates at this important place. So that's why it gets my vote for favorite Confederate photo.
Wow. And again, it's got so much great little detail. And I suppose the more you look at this picture, the more things you probably see.
Yes, you see, it's kind of a makeshift flagpole, because that's the original flagpole is there on the left. You can see what remains to it, but there at the center, they're sort of using a gantry of some sort and improving on that to put the flag up. And then the perfect wind showed up right for the photograph to be taken, which took 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds. So it had to stay in that position for us to see it fluttering in that fashion. So it really all comes together here.
Yeah, and also you can see the damage from obviously the bombardment of the first shots fired in the Civil War. You see the
yes, so yeah, it's got it all.
Excellent. Okay, so let's so just quickly before we move on, I just wanted to ask. So at this point, at the beginning of the Civil War, how new is photography? Just really quickly.
Yeah, so in April of 1861, it was 22 years old. It had been conceived long before, but nobody demonstrated it practically until a guy you've heard of named Daguerre came out and, figured a way to affix it to a plate. In his case, I believe a copper plate. That technology was very hard to use. It created a single positive, whereas, the Civil War photos are usually done with wet plate negatives, where you could repeat the process in a print rather easily. So throughout the 1840s, it was daguerreotype and a few less known processes, but by the 1850s, wet plate photography, something that creates a negative, came around, and they had really started to perfect that. And that led to two things: the popularity of the card photograph called the carte de visite, which is like a calling card with your picture on it, and of course, stereo photography, 3D photography, and that was really starting to sweep the world at the time, where you could travel the world by using 3D photographs taken with a twin lens camera and put into a device that made things, the pyramids of Egypt, later Civil War battlefields, appear in 3 dimensions.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to our next picture. Okay, so we have the first CT heavy artillery at Fort Richmond Richardson. So please explain why you like this picture. And I can see already why you like this picture, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think I must have picked this one for just the perfect composition. I mean, you've got a foreground, looks like snow. It could be light dirt, but likely snow showing on some of the ramparts or parapets there. You've got the artillery crew. You can see the soldiers lined up sort of in depth. I wish we were showing this one in 3D. Coming off as the tents run off into the distance and come together. You've got the troops in the middle. You've got not one, but two American flags, both visible in the breeze. And to me, and it's got a haunting sort of misty feel to it and has to be among the prettiest and best composed war photographs from that particular conflict. To me, it just really, it almost has it all. Now, for both the photos we've shown so far, we haven't, been able to recognize individual famous people or anything like that. So you already see where I get to. I'm a documentary photography guy. I like, to know what happened where and when more than what somebody looks like. But there are other people, every aspect of this subject. You've got people that are into every single bit of it. And that's one of the reasons I find it fascinating.
Yeah. And one of the things I like about this is I'm a reenactor. So I do American Civil War reenacting, and I can relate to the tents and the layout of the camp and the people, standing in formation, which I find quite fascinating. And it's the first time I've really properly looked at this picture, and it's just amazing. Yeah. And
well, I mean,
sorry, Karen.
We have about 10,000 of these outdoor documentary photographs. We also probably have millions of portraits, separate stories. So there's no shortage of it. But 10,000 is apparently enough for the general public to think that I'm sort of inventing new Civil War photographs. No AI can't quite do that all that well yet. It's just that there's so many, it's hard to commit them all to memory. So we all forget what our favorite photos are. And by the way, my list might change next week because I'm always updating what I'm doing.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move to a really important event in the American Civil War now, and that is, of course, this one. So I'll bring it up.
Let's see.
And so this is obviously carnage of what happens in front of the Dunker Church at Antietam, which is probably one of the most important battles. Go for it.
Good. And everybody out there who's my age already knows this, and anybody out there who's considerably younger, I'm 56 as we record this, I have to go not by what I remember doing, but what I think I would have done. And I think that I would have put another picture very similar to this one, identical, but different color after this one. So we'll see. This is, of course, dead in front of the Dunker Church. There we go. So I'm illustrating here with the dead of the Dunker Church. I can actually see that the image has been stretched probably by PowerPoint. So the church looks a little taller than it usually does. But nonetheless, you can see the dead soldiers, all Confederate, probably a mix of infantry and artillery with some of the other casualties of war. You can see dead horses or portions thereof. You can see a limber chest with a hole in it. And you can see the battered Dunker Church silhouetted by the West Woods. It was a feature during the battle everyone could see because of that silhouette. And you can see it, of course, in Alexander Gardner's photos. And these, among so many other things, I'll say, were the first photos in world history to really be seen by the general public that show the dead of war. Now, there had been other photos taken at the North Taku Fort in Indochina and things like that, but they weren't seen by people. There were other wars that they tried to cover, but not of the human carnage. So Gardner's 20 photographs under the employment of Matthew Brady at Antietam shocked the nation. You've heard the quotes, Daz. If Mr. Brady hasn't brought the bodies and laid them on our doorsteps, he's done something very like it. And what you're seeing here is the glass plate negative. If you put a black background behind it, switch the slide there, it turns into a positive. That's called an ambro. So here's the positive. So you could either put a black background on it and it flips the negative to be a positive, but you could also put it in the sunlight on some light sensitive paper, usually back then called albumin paper, and put it in the sun for a minute or 7, and it will burn an image onto the paper. And then you can do it with another piece of paper and another and another. Then you can go to the stereo format photograph that is on the yellow mount, that is 1 or 2 slides up. That is how you make these stereo views. The images have to be flipped to trick your brain, and then they have to be put into one of these things. We all have these right next to our desk, right? And you'd put that card in here, and then by looking through this viewer, you would see it actually in 3D. So it was these that sold like crazy. Now this is a slightly different picture you see without the dead in the foreground. And for me, I look at the dead quite enough. I think that's cool.
Yeah, amazing. And again, it is one of the most important events. But again, you sort of answered my question a little bit a minute ago about the carnage and people seeing this for the first time at home. But it is, isn't it? It must have been a shock for people seeing these images for the first time.
Yeah, I really can't stress enough. People have even today an idea of what war is like, and of course soldiers will tell you otherwise. Like, you see the pictures, you see the video, you feel like you're embedded with the troops nowadays sometimes, and they say you don't really get it, because how could we? Back then you were really reliant on just people's descriptions, and people had an added pressure for those descriptions to be of a heroic moment with your family member dying on the parapet with maybe a little trickle of blood running out of his mouth, flushed with success, maybe even an American flag draped across his breast for good order. And then they saw these all of a sudden, the heaps of dead, face down, pressed to the earth, far from home, a lonely, unidentified, bloated death. And that shocked the nation, the reality of war. This is no sort of grand adventure. Rather, it's the most disgusting of all human endeavors.
Yeah. And we're going to move on to one of my favourite pictures. And I've actually stood at this spot actually not long ago. So has a special meaning to me. And of course, this is Grant's Council of War at Massaponax Church.
Good,
So,
good.
yeah.
Super cool. So most of you are familiar with this. I love this as a photo documentarian and had seen it, but became more familiar with it in Frazanito's Grant and Lee, his unsung hero book, The Virginia Campaigns. You should be reading all four of his Gettysburg books, his Antietam book, and this book to really get an idea of documentary photography. And there are 3 photos taken from a window and then 2 more taken outside the church. You can see some of the pews they've dragged out, and you see General Grant almost dead center here. I believe this is the one with a cigar in his fingers or in his mouth. And I think it's the only photo that actually shows him with a cigar in his mouth or in his fingers. Some people like to disagree with me and bring up Lookout Mountain. But you can see the Army moving on the road behind them, the blur of motion there. You can actually say, oh, you got him here. And you can see that Grant has stood up and he's now looking at a map, apparently, over George Gordon Meade's shoulder. This moment in May of 1864, after Spotsylvania, before North Anna, is just incredible. This is the nerve center of the largest army in the world, deciding what to do and where to go next. And if this hadn't been captured by Timothy O'Sullivan that day, we would have wished it would have been, like so many other pictures that weren't taken. It just blows me away and just somehow gives you a closeness to it where you can almost start to imagine being there.
Yeah. And you guys for American Battlefield Trust have done a 360 then and now series of videos on your YouTube channel, and I've got to say they're amazing, aren't they? And you focus on this is one of the ones you focus on, isn't it?
Yes, thanks, Daz. I'm glad you liked. Yeah, this with our partners at Wide Awake Films to be able to actually step into a photo, and they're really good at this. They can sort of bring you into it till you're at the scene, throw some sounds in there and whatnot, and talk about what you're seeing there from the spot, the very spot where the photograph was recorded. So super special on my end to be able to sort of bring this photo to life. But even while we're shooting it, I sort of can't believe it because I'm standing where they stood and sort of stepping into the photo myself, which, by the way, all y'all can do at home. Some of it takes more imagination, depending on where you are and what photos you have, but you can do these things on your own. We just happen to have generous donors that support our making these high-end videos. Make sure you check them out. There's some that are in 360, very well seen in a swivel chair, and there are others where we curate it for you and sort of take you into the image. So check it out on our YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find the links in the description below for those, and support American Battlefield Trust, please. So the next one is quite important because this is called summarizing the meaning of the war. And so just explain this story.
So first of all, there might be some people on your channel who really who like to argue about why people fought, why the South seceded, and things like that. And I think that's fair. People over time want one reason why something happened. What was the one thing the Civil War was about? And of course, soldiers on both sides wrote why they fought. Today, people think that every Southerner fought for slavery and every Union soldier fought against slavery. And it is simply not true unless you believe the idea that their diaries, that they thought, ooh, someday how I feel might fall out of favor. Let me lie in my letters and to myself in my diary. However, the South did secede for one main reason, and they told us why they seceded, and it was slavery. And whether or not you buy that, the biggest outcomes of the war, you could say, was a state cannot secede from this union, and the slaves were freed. A monumental upheaval, to say the least. And here we are in the Confederate capital of Richmond with the ruins in part of that city behind, people who have to be experiencing their first taste of freedom. Shall I say, there's a very good chance that these people were enslaved until days or weeks before this photo was taken. So I don't know of another single photo that summarizes it so well. There's one taken in Charleston with kids amid the ruins, black kids amidst the ruins of the cradle of secession that is Charleston. But this one wins it for me because you can sort of look into their faces and know what they just went through and try to guess what they have ahead. And some of that is challenging and some of it is glorious.
Excellent. Now, the next one is really important probably to you because for people that don't know, Garry, you are a licensed battlefield guide at Gettysburg. Is that correct?
Yes, 30 years ago this year, I took my written test, and it's still one of the, I've hardly ever been so proud of anything else.
Excellent. So this one's going to be very special for you. So it's a two-plate panorama in the Valley of Death at Gettysburg. So please explain. And we've got 3 pictures here. So let me know when you want the next one.
Yeah, thank you. So this one, like Dad said, it's a two-plate panorama. I love this photo for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that Alexander Gardner was the first photographer to arrive on the scene after the Battle of Gettysburg. This photo, we estimate, Frazanito estimates, was taken on July 6th, so just 4 days after the battle fought in the Valley of Death. And here you are standing in the Valley of Death, seeing Little Round Top just days after its battle. You want to wonder what the soldiers saw? You're not seeing color, you're not seeing the people, but otherwise you're seeing exactly what they saw. So again, as a documentarian, I adore this photo. I'll note at the left, 1 or 2 graves you can see in the sort of middle left foreground over there. And those big boulders right behind it are still perfectly visible today. If you'll go to the next one, let's see what I put in there next. There they are. So the graves would have been right at middle left, and you can see these large boulders here and still see Little Round Top up there, closed when I took this picture, I believe, or soon after. I think I see some people on top, actually, but soon to be opened again. I'm not sure when this will air, so I'll look forward to that as well. Now, I think there's one more thing we can do just to show how a photo fits inside a photo. We can colorize the old photo and set it inside this photo. Let's see if that's what I put next. Yes, I did. I mean, look at the photo on the left, how it almost sort of goes with this rock. Actually, it does on the far left, and it just fits in there so perfectly. And I am willing to use any contrivance, including colorization, including other things, to try to take people back to the moment that the photo is showing. What did the photographer see, smell, and hear? And what was the photographer hearing? And what had just happened there? And I think all of these things, whether they are cheap tricks or not, help to take us closer to that moment, to drag the past forward. And then maybe a few people watching this or doing this on their own will say, now I get it. I understand a little bit better. And that's, I guess, my job as an educator.
Excellent. And we're going to move on to another one. So, favorite candid shot of the Civil War, Henry Hill. And
yeah. Okay.
It's amazing.
I mean, unbelievable. So here we have candid shots of the Civil War. The farther you are away from the camera, the less you pose, usually. This is a well-known event. This is off the top of my head. I can't remember if it's June 10th or 13th, 1865. This is at the dedication of the newly erected monument on Henry Hill or Henry House Hill. This is the monument that's still there today, right next to the Henry House. And you can see in the foreground sort of a fence with some cedar logs that had been pointy to keep people away from the monument. But here, the photographer who took several photos of the monument and the crowd there, then took his camera and put it inside the fence with his back to the monument and took a picture of the crowd during the festivities. And it is clear that General Heinzelman, who you see at left, with his hands on his hips, I guess that's akimbo, is not aware the photo's being taken. You might be able to see Montgomery Meigs with his arms crossed next to him. These are candid photos of generals, every bit as candid as the one, the Council of War with Grant, but this one's closer up. You're almost right there with the crowd. You can almost hear the speeches about to be made, and you can see the sort of dandy in the foreground at left and some of the soldiers who had just been through the Civil War. The civilians too, even if they didn't fight, even if some soldiers had easier duty than others, you're seeing this society that had passed through this terrible event. And that's why this is my favorite candid photo. I mean, check out the two generals at right. You don't see anything like that anywhere else.
No, definitely not. And so the next one is an important event, and that is the Grand Review. And so we have 4 pictures of that. So when you finish with the one, just let me know and we'll go on to the next one. So this is the first one.
Thanks, Daz. So there are about 40 pictures taken by Brady's firm and Gardner's firm. They had separated by then, and they both took photos and were better for it. Of the Grand Review in May of 1865, it spanned 2 days as largely, Meade's army and Sherman's army marched on by. And this is just one of those. This one was not particularly well thought of. This is the, Grand Review stand in front of the Executive Mansion, now known as the White House. But it's in zooming in that I love this photo. You can see the blur of cavalry going by. Let's see what I put next, Daz. I like the idea of you've read in the newspapers all this time, especially all these Northerners where the war hardly came. They didn't get to see these soldiers as a group. You've been hearing about the 16th Michigan or the 44th Ohio, but you never actually got to see them. And you get to point them out, sort of like that scene on the Titanic. Ooh, there's the Duchess of Roths, and there's the richest man on the ship. Could you imagine these civilians watching for 2 days? These groups go by, and you see that. That's that famous brigade, and that's that general highlighted. So I love looking through there. Let's see what I put next. Yes, that's right. Looking toward the crowd, you see my favorite general on the left. That's Winfield Scott Hancock, who after he left the field sort of came back to Washington to be in charge of the Veteran Reserve Corps, who were some of the soldiers actually keeping watch in front of the reviewing stand. And there he is after his Gettysburg wound, after the performance of his corps back in Washington. And you see him stoically standing by, watching not only the parade and his old Second Corps go by at some point, but also his Veteran Reserve Corps troops that are not far away from him. So I wanted to point that out because he's my favorite general.
There you go.
What's next?
He's amazing. There we go.
And then you've got it. The single detail of any photo that has more famous people than any other one. So first of all, in the foreground, you can still see the blur of the cavalry going by the Veteran Reserve Corps there. Then going from left, you can see the Seneca Indian Eli Parker. And then going right past the pillar, you see U.S. Grant looking right back at the camera. Next to him in a blur is the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, and next to him is the new president, Andrew Johnson. Next to him is a general named Wesley Merritt, and next to him is George Gordon Meade, bespectacled and looking back toward the camera as well. And in a blur, the Navy Secretary, Gideon Wells, and then a chaplain guy named Dennison, and then William Tecumseh Sherman with his white glove there, and the quartermaster of the U.S. Army, Montgomery Meigs. So let me just get this right. We've got the President of the United States. We've got the head of all the armies in Grant. We've got the Secretary of the Navy and the Secretary of the War, and in Grant also a future president, as well as Grant's chief of staff, and then the head of the 2 main armies, Meade and Sherman, all in the same photo. And until somebody took the time to not only zoom in on the photo, others had done this before, but most Civil War photos were taken in 3D, so there's 2 plates, and sometimes one plate shows more than the other. And I happened to zoom in on this plate in 2015, and boom, everything came into relief. You can't really see Meade that well in the other one, or the blurred Stanton or Merritt as well. And there it is. And to that end, all your viewers should be going to the Library of Congress, downloading the highest res photo of something they might not even be interested in. Rarely do I regret that. Very rarely. You almost always see things that are interesting to you, and once in a while you make a discovery like this.
Yeah, you must have had goosebumps when you saw that one. Amazing, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, somehow I get those
Really
with the
cool.
things I'm paid to do with more frequency than I deserve.
I know. Anyway, so this is the funniest one that you sent me, and I love this one. This is the best photo bomber of the war, so you know which one I'm talking about because you sent them to me. Now, this is the one of the pictures, and then in a minute we'll point out the photo bombers. But Gary, just tell us a little bit about this one first.
Yeah, this is earlier in the war. This is April of 1862 on the Virginia Peninsula. Again, a little stretched from the PowerPoint here, but what we're looking at is French royalty sort of sitting there. And in one of the other versions, there's about 4 versions of this photo. In one of them, sitting on a case of Moet et Chandon champagne, actually on the left there. But we've got the Prince de Joinville, and we've got the Comte de Paris, and we've got some of his sort of entourage here sitting on a makeshift table at Camp Winfield Scott, which is just outside of Yorktown, and was extensively photographed. At least 40 photographs were taken of this camp. And looking around, I'm trying to zoom in on wine bottles. Did pick out. I'm not sure if anybody sees him yet, but did pick out the best photo bomber, in my opinion, of the entire Civil War. Look at that. He's doing it right here. Daz is looking for his own photo bomber. So you
Yeah, sorry.
advance. I can't remember what I put next. If I put an outline, yeah. So look up in that direction and then check it out. If you'll go to the next one, check this dude out, just peering through the pine boughs, sort of meant for some protection. You can see this guy in a few of the different photographs, and people were goofy back then. They liked to photobomb the camera, even if it was a newer technology. And I like that. Zooming into photos almost always humanizes them when you can see people being people. Yes, they smile. Yes, they goofed around. Yes, they made weird faces. Yes, they got distracted. Yeah, they moved too much. They're just like us. And that is, we're different in some essentials, but in most of them, we are just like the people of the past. So
Right.
I use that to understand the past a little better and laugh.
Right. That's a great point there, and yeah, I keep thinking peekaboo. That's all I can keep thinking about when I see this picture. Yeah, but did you actually discover this guy peeking through the bushes? Or
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to know. People sometimes get on you about what a discovery is. Am I the first one to ever notice it? Well, no, he was there. And then I'm sure other people have noticed it before, but I'm the only one I knew that brought it to light, just like those guys at the Grand Review, seeing all those people in one plate. So you could say, am I the first who discovered it and brought it to the printed page or Facebook? Maybe. I never heard of anybody telling me that this guy was visible, but there are other people that focus on Yorktown, and they must have noticed this before. What I like about details of photographs, because they're so high res, better than any of the cameras we still use today, at least on the regular residential and light commercial market, is that you can zoom in and find whole new photos within the photos we otherwise know well. And that is where discoveries are being made. Sometimes those discoveries lead to something, or sometimes, like this one, you just get to see something cool that we can smile at and understand the people a little better.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to show you my favorite picture, and you're going to know what it is straight away, but I will explain to everyone. Now, this picture often gets mistaken for a different engagement, but as you probably know yourself, this is Second Fredericksburg, and this is the war at Fredericksburg, the sunken road. But this is my favorite. What's your take on this particular picture?
Well, first of all, I'll also note that our most popular one of those Step Into History videos is this one featuring our own Chris White. And if this guy likes any battle, it's Second Fredericksburg. So go check that out. Step Into History, Fredericksburg, Sunken Wall, or Chancellorsville. This photo has an immediacy not only confirmed by the photographer who said it was soon after that this wall was stormed, but you can see the debris of battle. And from what I know, this stuff there might have been the light placement of some movements here, but you see corpses who are not in a state of putrefaction yet. It's too immediate for that. You're seeing how spaced out are some of these guns. We know the line was lightly held. We know this wall had been made famous 6 months before this, and here we are seeing it when the Unions successfully stormed it. We're also seeing a site that is right near the visitor center, so there's something we can understand better about it. And what we're seeing is a full 0.9% of all the photos of dead soldiers on the field ever taken during the Civil War. It's a very rare thing, and it only was accomplished 8 occasions where photographers got on the field to take photos of the dead before they were in the ground. So we're seeing something comparatively rare, something we have to use to the fullest, and I think something that speaks to the Battle of Chancellorsville and Salem Church and Second Fredericksburg.
Okay, awesome. And so that's our photographs finished. You are also Vice President of the Centre of Civil War Photography. So would you like to just quickly give that a little plug for us, if you wouldn't mind?
Yes, I would encourage all y'all with your history passion. I've been able to make it my vocation. Not everybody can do that, but get involved with organizations, whatever interests you the most, whether it be uniforms or chaplains or a particular battlefield or a group, engage on social media, go to their tours, do what you can to get involved. And early on, I came across some other people who shared my obsession for Civil War photography. And we sort of together, these guys had already started forming a group, and I joined in because I knew they knew what they were talking about, to form this Center for Civil War Photography in 2001. And we've held an Image of War seminar, one or more, event every year since 2001, with the exception of some of the COVID years. And we get and go in the footsteps of the photographers. And this year, I don't know when this will come out, but this October we'll be back in Gettysburg and following the photographers around that place. And William Frazanito will be there for a bit. So check out civilwarphotography.org to check out some of what we have to offer. And of course, battlefields.org for all the great American battlefield trust stuff.
Excellent. And the links will be in the description. And just one more thing, Garry. So you get all these pictures from, and please let everyone know where they can view and look at these pictures themselves if they wanted to.
Yes, please empower yourselves. I have a collection, but I don't have a rare collection of Civil War photos. 90% of what I post on my Facebook page, by the way, that's Garry Adelman's Civil War page, in case some of you aren't on that yet. They're from the Library of Congress. Why? They have the largest collection, but also they have them in the highest resolution compared to the National Archives or the other repositories that also offer Civil War photos. So loc.gov, or just Google Prints and Photographs Online Catalog. This will come up, and then you can just start searching for your favorite thing. If your favorite thing is Southern subjects, you're going to see fewer. Most of the Civil War photos were taken by Northern photographers under Northern areas of control. But I think when you start playing around and downloading the highest, biggest file and zooming in, I think you're going to find some stuff that is interesting to you, and I think you might start to make some discoveries as well.
Excellent. And so all that is left to say, Garry, is one thing is all the links will be available in the podcast description for everything Garry has just said there. And all that is left to say is thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. I said on one condition that we do it in 30 minutes. And by my count, I think we've pretty much done that. So Daz, it's been great to see you again. I like what you and others are doing online and otherwise. And I've seen you in your reenactor garb. So keep it up, man.
Thank you.